What's up YouTube? Capital G here, talking YCS Prague in this video, or as I like to call it, YCS Battle Fader. If you didn't watch the Twitch stream of this event, you're just not going to get that reference. But anyways, this is going to be a recap of the event. This is like the shortened down version in case you don't want to have to read through the feature matches, in case you don't want to have to watch the 40-minute duels. This is essentially your cliff notes to YCS Prague. For starters, Kovacic. I probably butchered that name, but anyways, congratulations, man. This was your winner with Draco Pals, and even though his version was kind of out there, this guy definitely had some next level tech that was suited for him and his playstyle. Like, he played Pendulum Rising, he ran that, and I was like, wow, I had to actually look the card up, and it's kind of legitimate. Like, it really works in a deck where you're running 3 instant fusion, because just being able to get the more pendulum cards on the field is just, it's really good. Even though you have to give up a monster, it doesn't really matter, because a lot of times you'll instant fusion them back. But I feel like his version of Dark Draco Pals is probably going to become the norm, or seen as the best build of, you know, any Performa Pal deck right now. Like, whatever your Pepe deck evolved into, the dark version is probably the best version, and I feel like it is for a couple of reasons. One is because of Zephyros the Elite and just like how wombo combo that card is. Like, you just dump it in the grave, then you can put your pendulum scales back in your hand, and then you just proceed with all your combo plays. Like, essentially you get rank 4 spams to the extreme. And the card was played in Japan, but they had the Vava chain, so you know they could always get to the card. But it's like, we do have, you know, we still got, you know, Armageddon Knight, so he was running multiple of those, and they do run reinforcements of the army so that you can get to it. And it's like, Armageddon Knight opens up so many plays, not just with Zephyros the Elite, but if you run in, like, if you just run one Shadow Dragon, like, you instantly have a monster where you can just summon it and you can out anti-spell fragrance. Like, you don't have to worry about, oh god, I gotta draw my Twin Twisters or lose, you know what I mean? Just running one dragon in your deck, and you can just normal summon Armageddon Knight, pop the, you know, anti-spell, and just proceed the wombo combo on their face. And what instant fusion does for this deck, oh my god, like, instant fusion is so gonna get limited, or Norton's gonna get banned, because dude, every time this guy was going off, I kid you not, instant fusion was always in the mix. So the deck is just so rank 4 spammy, and the rank 4s are just like, I still look at rank 4s as kind of like the king of the hill when it comes to like Xyz. And if you're running the dark version of Draco Pals, then you get things like, you get the turn 1 Nightmare, which is really good when you combine that with Reflasia. You also get things like Master Key Beetle, which if you have a Floodgate card that beats a certain deck, it's basically GG, because your opponent generally won't have an out. Like, if you're playing Monarchs, if you're playing against Monarchs and you get like Key Beetle plus Master Restrict, it's GG. If you get like it against Cosmos, where you've got Key Beetle plus Iron Wall, that's GG. Like, your opponent generally can't out them. They can't rely on the, oh man, I'm gonna call the Haunted for Slip Rider. Okay, well, that doesn't work, because my guy says that you can't blow up, you know, Iron Wall. And against Monarchs, like, oh, you have Twin Twister, doesn't even matter, because my guy's protecting it. So, you know, this is probably the best deck of the format right now, but it's a lot flimsier than the, you know, Performages and Pals that we saw a month ago. This is not as good as Pepe. The main reason is the recovery for the deck is not nearly as high or consistent as Pepe, because a lot of times in these turn 1s for Draco Pals, they won't actually have Joker or Monkey Board, and Pepe like always got to those cards turn 1. So a lot of times when they pendulum summon and they consolidate into Xyz, usually they go for like stunny Xyz, like you know, Abyss Dweller, Reflasia, Evil Swarm Nightmare. If you have something like Dark Hole or Regeki, you kind of just wreck them. They don't really have any recovery plays unless they happen to top deck, you know, if they top deck an Instant Fusion or Joker or something. They've got a couple of them, but for the most part, they lose their field, and all of their King of the Feral Imps and that stuff will just go down with it. They may have like one card in hand. So as far as diversity goes and a breakdown of what was played, what were the top decks, here's your top 32 breakdown. And for the most part, it was what we expected. I thought going into this event that Monarchs, Cosmos, and Draco Pals were on a different, like, I thought they were just the definitive 3 best decks of the formats, and you see that if you combine the numbers of those 3 decks in top 8, I believe it's 25, let's see, 13 and 12, yeah, it ends up being 25 out of the top 32, but even then, you know, you still have 7 other, like, road decks. I mean, I don't really know if you consider Burning Abyss or, you know, Atlantean Mermail to be rogue, but that's still way better than what we had a month ago at like YCS Atlanta, where 29 out of 32 was just, you know, fucking performages and pals. But that's another thing. Performages are just there. I guess if this is a sign of things, they're without Damage Juggler, or Dan's Game Juggler, I like to call him. Without Damage Juggler and Plush Fire, I guess performages are just dead, because they don't seem to be anywhere present. Now, I was quite surprised that Phantom Knights they only got one in top 8. That was kind of, or excuse me, top 32. I was surprised because, to me, from what I've seen, the deck is basically almost as grindy as Burning Abyss, you know, and the deck has more removal than Burning Abyss because of Break Sword. It can make those Master Key Beetle plays where if you have like Key Beetle plus Vanities, you can kind of just win. You know, the deck puts out a lot of big damage with the Dark Rebellion XC plays. I was kind of surprised. I think the deck I think it's really good. I think it's very grindy. It can incorporate a ton of floodgates. I think that it was still kind of new. You know, a lot of people probably didn't have time to test it, as the Jeff Jones version just came out like last week, and you know, the hardcore fans of Phantom Knights have been playing the deck for a while, but to the masses, they're just kind of getting on it. So I'm hoping Phantom Knights will do better in the coming weeks. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Burning Abyss do, because if you look at Burning Abyss and they're 4 out of 32, Burning Abyss first off did make it into top 4, but if you look at this and how they're doing without Beatrice, man, when they get Beatrice, I don't know, it might be a lot scarier of a deck. Now, one thing that I noticed, I think that more matches in this event were lost than won. You know, you had a Cosmo player that completely misplayed this guy right here in his top 4 match. He didn't make, he had 2 easy ways to play around Battle Fader, which he didn't know that his opponent played. And I did it at the regionals too. Whenever you're playing Monarchs, it's very common to side in Battle Fader against Cosmos, because you don't want to just die. You know, you don't want them to go Farm Girl game. So it's very common, and you know, he could have summoned Cyber Infinity. He could have won that way to stop the Battle Fader effect. He could have went for Volcasaurus. He could have popped the opponent's red layer and then made Gaia Dragon and ran over the Edia. That would have done a ton of damage. He could have won that. He did none of that, ended up losing the match. In the finals, the guy that ended up winning the finals, he tried to normal summon twice in his first turn, and he didn't even get punished for it. He still ended up winning. In game 2, he summoned Stardust Dragon, which I'll talk about in a second, and he used its effect, and he didn't even remember to get it back during the end phase, and he still ended up winning because Pendulum Summon's completely balanced. He Pendulum summoned 5 monsters and killed the Cosmo guy in his next turn. So, you know, people make misplays all the time. I feel like more matches were lost than they were won at this event. Now, speaking of Stardust Dragon, this guy was running a lot of unconventional things, and Stardust Dragon might work it might work itself back into the meta, guys, because like it was actually shocking to see how effective the card was against Cosmos. Like when I really looked at, you know, the Cosmos player, and this was the guy, he played in the finals. He got second. He was running a crazy, weird build of Cosmos with like 3 Reasonings and 3 Dragon of the Oasis Souls. It was basically like 10-man turbo or 10-can turbo. But anyways, like Stardust Dragon is actually pretty good against Cosmos. Like who would have thought? Because you think about it, right? All the destruction effects that they use. Regeki, you know, some of them play Dark Hole. They play Slip Rider at 3. They play Dark Destroyer at 3. A lot of them will run, you know, 1 or 2 copies of Cosmojo. Like that's a lot of destruction, and if you can, in the early game, you're like turn 1, if you can get a Stardust Dragon plus like a Rafflesia, they really can't kill it. They can't Regeki you, they can't Dark Hole you. You know, if they summon Dark Destroyer or something, all you gotta do is just bottomless it and then negate the Dark Destroyer's effect with like the Stardust Dragon. Like it's really, really hard for Cosmos to get over that. If they summon a Forerunner, something that doesn't have a destruction effect, then you just bottomless it with Reflation, just, you know, kill them the next turn or just keep it moving. And if you're running things like Time Space Trap Hole, it's even easier. So I think Stardust might, like, ironically work itself back in the meta. And with Draco Pals being able to run Luster Pendulum and Mass Chameleon, like it's really easy for this deck to summon that. So I don't know, man. You know, decks like Psyframes, decks like you know, Yang Zings, basically anything that can sync well, you might have to start looking at some Stardust Dragons, because the card is actually a lot more effective than I would have ever guessed. But anyways, it's good to see that there's a lot more diversity in the meta. I'm looking for Burning Abyss to become a little stronger within the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping that Phantom Knights are not a 1-week trend. I'm hoping that they're a legitimate deck that people are going to play It's still sad I never see any Psyframes because I feel like that deck has like really good potential. But for the most part, it was the big three as expected, and it looks like a lot of the Monarch players have definitively switched to like the not Psyframes but the Super Quantum Engine, because you know the red layer is essentially tribute fodder and a tribute at the same time, and you know, it just makes the deck a little more consistent, with blue layer being able to essentially dodge stuff like effect veil. Like if you get effect veilered, whereas with Edia you just kind of like just rip, you can't really do much. But with this deck you can, or with the quantum version, you can still do stuff. So let me know what you guys thought of the event. Was there anything crazy that you noticed? Anyways, thank you guys for watching as always.